Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Samina Qasim, your Research Methods and Skills course facilitator. Today, I'm going to give you a lecture on interviews. The aim of this chapter is to introduce a commonly used method of primary data collection, interviewing. Different types of interviews will be discussed, and ways in which to structure and carry out interviews will be explained. This chapter has the following key points to discuss. We'll start off with primary data collection, followed by structured and unstructured interviews, then some tips to follow, and then we'll end up with group interviews. Now, primary data collection. Primary data collection methods are the ways in which data collected from original sources for the specific purpose of the study can be gathered. Data collection methods are an integral part of research design. Since business is largely a social phenomena, much of the information needed to make decisions in the work setting has to come from people. For instance, from employees, consumers, managers, investors, and suppliers. For this reason, interviews, observation, and questionnaires are very popular in business research. These methods allow the researcher to collect a wide variety of different sorts of data from human respondents. A thorough knowledge of these methods will help you to evaluate alternative approaches to primary data collection. As you will understand, the primary data collection decision, which involves the selection of methods of obtaining the information needed, is interrelated with the other steps in the research process. That is why your choice of methods will depend on the objective of the study, number one, number two, the research questions, and number three, the research strategy. Facilities available, the degree of accuracy required, the type of data required, the time span of the study, the expertise of the reviewer, and other costs and resources associated with and available for data gathering will also affect the choice of methods. Problems researched with the use of appropriate methods greatly enhance the value of the study. Now, a widely used method of collecting data in business research is to interview respondents to obtain information on an issue of interest. An interview is a guided, purposeful conversation between two or more people. There are many different types of interviews. Individual or group interviews may be unstructured or structured and conducted face-to-face, by telephone, or online. Unstructured and structured interviews will be discussed first. Now, unstructured interviews are so labeled because the interviewers does not enter the interview setting with a planned sequence of questions to be asked of the respondent. A possible objective of an unstructured interview is to bring some preliminary issues to the surface so that researcher can determine what factors need further in-depth investigation. Structured interviews. The interviewer has a list of predetermined questions to be asked of the respondent, either personally, through the telephone, or via computer. Interviews can be conducted either face-to-face or over the phone. They may also be computer-assisted. Almost unstructured interviews in business research are conducted face-to-face. Structured interviews may be either face-to-face or through the medium of telephone, depending on the level of complexity of issues involved. the likely duration of interview, the convenience of both parties, and the geographical area covered by the survey. Telephone interviews are best suited when information from a large number of respondents spread over a wide geographic area is to be obtained quickly, and the likely duration of each interview is, say, about 10 minutes or less. Many market surveys, for instance, are conducted through structured telephone interviews. In addition, computer-assisted telephone interviews are also possible and easy to manage. Face-to-face interviews and telephone interviews have other advantages and disadvantages. These will now be briefly discussed. Face-to-face interviews. The main advantage of face-to-face or personal interview is that the researcher can adapt the questions as necessary, clarify doubts, and ensure that the responses are properly understood by repeating or rephrasing the questions. The researcher can also pick up non-verbal cues from the respondents. Any discomfort, stress, or problem that the respondent experiences can be detected through frowns, nervous tapping, and other body languages unconsciously exhibited by her. This would be impossible to detect in telephone interview. The main disadvantage of face-to-face interviews are the geographical limitation they impose on survey and the vast resources needed if such surveys need to be done nationally or internationally. The cost of training interviewers to minimize interviewer bias are also very high. Another drawback is that respondents might feel uneasy about the anonymity of their responses when they interact face-to-face with the interviewer. Telephone interviews. The main advantage of telephone interviewing from the researcher point of view is that a number of different people can be reached in a relatively short period of time. From the respondent standpoint, it eliminates any discomfort that some of them might feel in facing the interviewer. It is also possible that most of them might feel less uncomfortable disclosing personal information over the phone than face to face. A main disadvantage of telephone interviewing is that the respondent could unilaterally terminate the interview without warning or explanation by hanging up the phone. Caller ID might further aggravate the situation. This is understandable, given the numerous telemarketing calls people are bombarded with on a daily basis. To minimize this type of non-response problem, it is advisable to call the interviewee ahead of time to request participation in the survey, giving an approximate idea of how long the interview will last, and setting up a mutually convenient time. Interviewees usually tend to appreciate courtesy and are more likely to cooperate. It is a good policy not to prolong the interview beyond the time originally stated. As mentioned earlier, another disadvantage of the telephone interview is that the researcher will not be able to see the respondent to read the non-verbal communication.